Thanks for tuning in. This is the painting that we're going to be working on. This is the finished version, and just a fun little painting here. Some pack of wolves in the moonlight out in the woods. So I appreciate you tuning in, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Marc Harvill Art. So getting started here, just working in the background. I used a little gray ground color our for our base coat here, and that'll just kind of help kill off any white from the gesso on the canvas. So I'm just using a little dioxazine purple, a little ultramarine blue here. kind of muted it with some burnt sienna, and kind of got that nice little hazy purple tone while the canvas is still wet, coming back in with some darker values to create some tree trunks, a little bit of distance here, and this just slapping it on pretty quickly. This will kind of give the impression that we've got some thick, deep woods and a little bit of distance here. Coming back and using my dagger brush and bring in just a couple little limbs here. I like these dagger brushes. They're just about as effective to create thin lines as a script liner brush. So great brush to use. And so I'm just going to lay in here some of these branches. And just kind of try to get these in here pretty quickly, and then we can keep working here. I wanted to make sure that the background here is still pretty wet. It helps to kind of haze the tree trunk in as I bring those in here. Coming back with a little bit of a gray mixture here, just to add add some highlight to these trees. So as a good rule of thumb, when you're creating distance, everything in the background, you want to use your cool colors on the color wheel. You want to use your blues and your purples and your grays. And then as you come into the foreground, you want to get the colors a little bolder, a little richer, a little warmer. So you'll use more of your warm tones, the oranges, the yellows, things of that nature. So using my script liner brush a little bit, bring in some more branches and a couple more tree trunks here with my dagger brush. Get those all laid in real quickly. And start coming in with some of the first of the foliage. So using my small little fan brush here, it's a great brush to kind of try to lay in the quick different bushes and some of the limbs, some of the tree shrubbery here, and still just using that gray mixture as I lay that in right now. Coming back with a little bit more of a dark gray just to get it a little darker, a little thicker. That will give the indication that these are even closer trees that are coming into the foreground. So kind of go from the purples to the grays and then to the nearly the black as the color that is closer to the foreground. So that helps to create the illusion that we've got some depth here. We get through all that right now. And now I'm going into a blue green is my kind of my shadow color for the foliage. So I've just mixed a sap green with my ultramarine blue and a little white to opaque it. And that will kind of be my my shadow side of the foliage and the shadowed leaves. Now I'm coming back with my small round brush just to create a little more individual leafing here using that blue-gray mixture. And even coming in now with some of my yellow-green. I've got a kind of a phthalo vivid yellow-green on my palette. So just using that to kind of start to create some individual highlights on the leaves here that are getting some direct getting hit directly by the moonlight. And again, I'm still trying to kind of stay off to the right because I know that the light source is coming from the right. So as I create these individual leaves, I'm just trying to think about leaf patterns, how they clump, how they bunch together, how they overlap. Certainly looking at my negative space, want to make sure that I'm leaving plenty of negative space and plenty of that underpainting to come through as well. And that'll help as well to continue to create that depth and help to create kind of that three-dimensional um, kind of three-dimensionality to these bushes and these trees. So quickly to lay these in as well, really not spending a ton of time or detail on the background. Obviously, the wolf pack is going to be our primary focal point to the painting. So with that in mind, I don't want the background to necessarily compete with the painting's focal points. So really, again, just keeping it pretty loose, pretty simple. I'm not getting into a lot of detail here, but just drawing enough in here that it really gives the illusion and the indication that these are deep woods. Bring a little more highlight on these trunks here, just going back into that gray and adding a little bit of titanium white and get those kind of worked in a little bit better. I'm just kind of jumping around here. I'm trying to create the illusion of bark. So just a simple downward stroke with the little round brush. I think this is a number 2 brush, and just getting those kind of worked in here really quickly. So just kind of take your time here. Really think a lot about what we're trying to accomplish here. Really want to think a lot about a lot of things as you're working into the painting. Going through my mind right now, I'm thinking about um, constructing the painting, what I'm trying, to do with my values, my colors. Um, be pretty thoughtful about how that all plays into the ultimate scheme of the painting here. So still trying to bring in some of the highlights here on the right side of these trunks, and really to solidify the light source and where those are originating. The great thing I liked about this painting was just the enormous amount of contrast. I think contrast in a painting is really an important um, just just an important tool to utilize in a painting. There's certain rules to painting you want to think about from the color wheel how you use that, how you use your values, the different light and dark colors that go into every color, how those colors compare and contrast with each other and complement each other from the color wheel. So because of my background being purple or sort of a purplish blue color, on the color wheel, I know that the value, the complementary color to purple would be yellow. So bringing in my phthalo yellow green is definitely kind of what I was thinking is the reason I wanted to bring in the highlight colors with that color. I knew that it would complement very well with the background on the woods. So just trying to turn my canvas there just to get the right angle. I'm using a canvas board, by the way. I'm not using stretched canvas. I like canvas board. I still prep the canvas. I still do kind of the same things I usually do with stretched canvas or linen, which is I like to sandpaper the canvas nice and smooth. So I did all the sandpapering and putting the base color coat on. Let that all dry and then started in on the painting. So again, I don't like to usually paint from a direct white canvas because sometimes that white color can kind of seep through and you can see the gesso in the painting, which I don't like. So that's kind of why I went ahead and threw on a gray color here, a gray ground color to begin with on the painting. So coming back here and talking about the contrast, the rule of contrast here is I'm using my gray mixture and I changed the value a little lighter, added some titanium white to that. And now I'm creating just some branches, some sticks and twigs that are kind of coming out here. And since I'm putting that in front of the dark background, that contrast is a nice element that I'm adding to the painting here, and I wanted to get that in here as well. So just some raw, naked branches and limbs. Just using my script liner brush to accomplish this. Script liner brushes can be a little tricky sometimes. You've got to get a really good consistency on your color, get it nice and thin and have plenty of it on the brush. That helps to make it work kind of like ink and be able to get it on the canvas. But I know it's not always the easiest brush to use. But again, I found that the dagger brush, if you hold it straight instead of sideways, you get nearly as sharp of a point with the dagger brush as you can with the script liner brush. So it was just a nice little happy accident to learn that I could do that with these dagger brushes. So pretty helpful. So I'll get a couple more of these branches kind of laid in here and just making them all sorts of sizes and shapes and getting those out laid out there. So just putting together this pretty quick background, get that all laid in, and then we can start really focusing on what's really going on in the foreground. So the idea was to, excuse me, the idea was to, have this be maybe an early morning or a really late night, early morning sort of a feel to the painting. I'll lay in some fog here pretty soon and just kind of make kind of a dark, kind of dreary wooded scene here, early morning with our pack of wolves. That moonlight still filtering through. That kind of, I thought, just set kind of an interesting tone for the painting. And so here's where I'm going to use my airbrush and start laying in that fog that I wanted to bring in. I want to get this in here real quickly before I started working on the foreground. So, but I thought just bring in some atmosphere. I'm using white and ultramarine blue in my air in my brush to get that in there. So now I'm coming back here with nearly a black color. Um, Utilized a lot of my dark colors, the sap green, burnt umber, um, ultramarine blue, and doxazine purple. Just get all those colors, alizarin crimson. You can bring all those colors together. They make nearly a dark, almost like a black color. So wanted to get that in real quick. And now what you see me doing is I'm trying to bring in some of the background through the canopy of the trees. So it's just simply taking my number 2 round brush and I'm going back into that bluish purple background color again. And I'm just opening up the canvas. I'm trying to have a little bit of that sky color or background color sort of filter through the uh, the different clumps of leaves. So that's really all I'm trying to do there. Adding some highlight to the branches now. Again, that's my gray color that we mixed, and a little white, and then adding just a little bit of the light to the shadow, and that helps to make it more three-dimensional. So now I'm coming back in here, and I'm really just bringing in that gray color and really dry brushing in, um, just dry brushing in a little bit that gray, making it pretty soft. I'm just kind of scrubbing it. There's not a lot of paint on the brush, and I just keep scrubbing it until the paint is gone from the brush completely. And then I just add a little bit more paint. So it's really not a lot. I'm even rubbing a lot of it off on my paper towel so that I just simply don't have a whole lot on the brush itself. Now this is just the stone here in the middle of the painting. This is what one of the wolves will be sort of stepping up onto, and so get that kind of laid in here in the middle of the painting. And slowly building here. I'm just slowly building up. I start really dark gray and then go into changing the value with some titanium white, and that will lighten it up. And so I'm bringing in just another layer of a little bit lighter gray, and I'll keep just adding in layers, just really subtly, really gently. And this is the same technique I would use for snow. Um, Same technique that I would use on a dirt road. So it works great for rocks and cliffs as well. And I just like to take it and slowly build on it, and just dry brush, scumble it in pretty quickly, and keep adding and building those layers. And I'll keep adding till almost a pure white. I wanted to make this a pretty bright painting. Um, Definitely have a lot of contrast with the light values coming into the shadows, and this would simulate the moonlight kind of bursting through the clearing here. So good technique, and it works for a lot of applications. Um, so continue to build on this this big stone here, and keeping the light source to the right, like I've been trying to do. And now just really kind of forming the rock here, forming the shadowed side, coming back and adding some cracks, adding some little divots and holes in the rock, and just kind of dressing it up. It will get covered quite a bit with some with a little bush in the front, which I'll lay in at the very end of the painting after we bring the wolves in. But as you construct these things, you want to just do it in layers. Everything's done in layers, starting with your background and then slowly working forward. Um, and so that's what, you never want to have to work around an object if you can help it. Sometimes you get so far in your painting and then you have a great idea and you have no choice, but it's good to get it all laid in. So I'm using a pure titanium white here for these stones. This is in the shadowed section, I'm using more of a darker gray, but in the light section, I'm using a pure white. And these are just my stones now, and I'm coming back with my dark black color, and laying in the shadow side of those stones. So it's kind of showing that it's casting a shadow, helps it to look kind of dimensional and individual. Almost kind of helps to really separate it from the ground. And it's a simple little um, stroke, and a little easy trick that you can use to create some really pretty realistic stones and rocks and pebbles that are just kind of splattered all over. It's important though to remember when you do that, you don't want to have anything uniform. You want to make sure that you jump all over, have different shapes and sizes. Very important. The thing that really helps to make a painting look more realistic is you want to have a lot of imperfection. Life is full of imperfection. So you'll never have the same size of rocks. You'll never have the same angle of branches or trees oftentimes. You want to be very cautious against that. So now I'm coming back with just a pure yellow. Um, so I wanted to get even more of some bright highlight onto the right side of these little branches here. And by using that pure yellow, which is the complement color to the background, I thought just helped to make the painting flow even better and complement itself. So these are the things I have to think about. I think about my color wheel and about the complement colors and the contrast colors. I think about my rule of contrast quite a bit, and my composition to the painting. I got to keep thinking about composition, and what looks great. Putting those bushes off on the ground level to the right and to the left are natural eye stoppers. I put that in there because I wanted to keep the focal point to the wolves in the center. Now I've come back. I did draw in the wolves by hand, and now I'm just blocking them in with my gray color. Again, my gray color, my go-to gray color is ultramarine blue and burnt umber with a little titanium white. And I'm kind of favoring more on the side of the blue over the umber in this situation here, but that does form a really nice rich gray. And so I've made myself a pile of that, and that's how I'm going to block in and underpaint all the wolves. So we'll get that in. Just really watching shape here. These animals, as you paint animals, have a tendency of expanding as you paint upon them. So sometimes it's good to paint kind of within the lines of the charcoal outline there, as I'm doing, because as I start adding fur, it'll start to make the kind of fill out the creature a little more. And so just to make sure I don't make the creature look awkward or just too swollen, want to keep to the true form of the animal. I'll keep those initial blocked in colors pretty thin and within the lines because I know it will expand. Just a little trick that will help out. So we're going to start with the most distant wolf here because we know that his brother wolves are going to be in front of him. So it's just best to get that all worked in. Now I'm using a small little round brush that I've fanned out. I've kind of flattened it and fanned it out so I can have those little bristles. And I'm going back and I'm just taking that gray mixture and I'm changing the value by simply adding some titanium white that lightens the value up to a lighter gray. And now I can kind of start to lay in the initial structure of the fur, um, and we'll get that kind of worked in, and then slowly, once again, we'll build upon this. So, and I'll keep using kind of lighter gray tones, kind of lightening my values as I keep building upon the animal. And that's what will help to start to create the three-dimensionality, the structure and form of the creature will start to make it look like fur. But just be patient with the process as you work this in, and it's detail work. So you want to kind of slow down at this point in time and be a little more deliberate in your brush strokes, a little more patient with the process, and just let it kind of work out. And I've started with I decided I wanted to bring in my highlight color right away and kind of work around that. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I leave my brightest highlights for the very end. But in this case, I just felt like as I'm bringing in that moonlight that's hitting these wolves, that I would really kind of bring in the brightest highlight colors to start with, and then kind of work back from there. So I'm working on the little wolf's eye right now, and the eyes are yellow on the wolf. So I went in and I used my complement colors of purple and yellow, and I dulled my yellow out, and that was my initial base color for the eye. And then I come back with more of a pure yellow mixed with a little white, so it's a really bright yellow, and bring in some of the highlights on the eye. You can't really see it in this angle. It is a small feature on the animal. It's more detectable when you actually look at the painting itself up close, but that's how I wanted to start with the eye. Now I'm coming here with my script liner brush. Script liner brushes, it does take some time to use them this way, but I like to use the most detailed fur with my liner brush, and so I find that I get some really good brush strokes for fur using the liner brush, and that's where I'm kind of coming in now, going and playing with my tones and my different values here, and kind of build upon the wolf's face and his muzzle, working on the back of the ears. So again, just a process. It certainly takes time. I would probably guess that I averaged between 3 to 4 hours working on each wolf. You can see that using a tiny little brush like this definitely does take time, and so I certainly took my time as I worked on each creature. So a significant amount of time definitely went into the painting. But the background, we threw that on real quickly. Again, we didn't put a ton of detail. I kept it pretty loose and free, and I worked fairly quickly. Getting into the details now on my focal point on the painting, though, will take some time. So just have to be patient with that. But it's exciting to see the animal kind of come alive right out of the canvas, kind of jumps out at you here. And what I'm thinking now is, I really want to make sure that I don't kill my undercoat, that undercoat of gray. I really want a lot of that to still show through. And since the moon is kind of coming from the right, but not only is it coming from the right, it's actually coming from behind the wolves. So we're going to have the left side of the wolves pretty dark and in shadow, but still we have to work on the fur, and we want to have all that kind of show through. So It does take some time, but it's really the play between the light and the shadow that really makes this work. And that's what really makes it look three-dimensional and kind of realistic. And you'll see me kind of just adjust things. I'll keep going back a little bit here, a little bit there. I'll try to add a different color, a different a different value, and just highlight some things. What I used, I used a photograph of a pack of wolves that I came across. I did change a lot from what I was, I used I guess some artistic license and some creativity and kind of made it my own. But I used a photograph of some wolves here and and that's what I'm kind of using as a reference piece to help me as I build out these wolves. So kind of continuing on getting more of the highlight, trying to get just get the right dimensions here, and working down the neck a little bit. So takes a little while, a little time, and and getting this all kind of laid in here. Fun process though. Animals are always pretty challenging, especially those that have fur. That can definitely take some time, but still a fun challenge, something different. I don't do an enormous amount of wildlife. I need to probably do a little bit more. I know I can continue to learn and try to hone my skills, and so it's just a nice break from some of the things that I typically do, and I think that's pretty important to continue to challenge myself, try different subjects, and that kind of keeps me from getting too bored with doing the same thing. So yeah, trying to get a little more shadow color here. My shadow colors I'm kind of depending on um, using that gray pile, but also adding a little bit of umber and a little dioxazine purple as well, and get that put in there. Purple is, in my opinion, one of the most useful colors on my palette. They're also one of the most dangerous if not used right. Purple can absolutely kill a painting if it's not used properly. But I love purple. It's one of my favorite colors. I almost always have it in shadow. I will nearly always mix my dioxazine purple with burnt sienna and sometimes burnt umber, one or the other or both. Um, and it really, the sienna definitely helps to offset it a little bit, putting a little red into it, which I would tend to do is I'm working on foreground because I want those warmer colors, and burnt sienna is definitely a warm color with all the red in that brown. So if I'm working kind of more in the background, though, I might tend to use more of a burnt umber with my dioxazine purple. But excellent color, and I use it again for tons of shadow. I'll use it in my stucco on brick, on walls, and you just need to be really careful with it. So, all right, moving on with our wolf here, we are kind of getting down to his tummy, and his forelegs, and getting those kind of worked out. Just still slowly building and working on this. I'm kind of jumping between using my flattened round brush that I fanned out, and then I go into using my small #2 round brush for some intermediate fur strokes with the brush, and then ultimately go to my script liner brush to get the real fine detail fur kind of laid in. But again, the important thing is trying to look at allowing for that dark underpainting to show through. I'm watching my negative space, using the underpainting to help me to actually create the contours of the muscularity in the shoulder region, in the neck, down into the legs. So you can see that I really am allowing for quite a bit of the gray undercoat to show through. And that's really going to help you to create the illusion of that three-dimensional quality, and that this is helping to make it look a little more realistic and not so cartoonish. So again, take some time. I think I averaged maybe about 3 hours on this first wolf, probably another 3 hours on the middle wolf, and then I averaged about 4, maybe even 5 hours on the primary wolf that's sitting up on the stone there. So took some time, but again, a lot of fun. This is the focal point of the painting, and so I wanted to make sure that the quality where the eye is being drawn is really pretty top notch there. So kind of working on this front leg here down into the paw region as he's kind of lifting his leg up a little bit, and he's coming along pretty well. I'm coming in on some really intense highlights. I'm using a pure white. So now just coming in here and doing a couple little refining strokes, just kind of looking at little areas that I can bring in and help improve on. Doing a little more highlighting, a little more pure white, a little bit of yellow mixed in on that white, but coming in pretty thick on that white, just to ensure that it's pretty bold and deep. And so now we're just starting the exact same process all over again. I'm going to go ahead and block in our center wolf, and his shape is just a little bit more in profile than the last wolf. So going to get this thing kind of blocked in here pretty quickly. So I apologize for having to move the canvas around, but I got to try to grab those angles. I'm using one of my favorite brushes, which is my angular brush, and this one always does such a great job getting in and around all the angles that I want to get on our wolf here. But the same theory, keeping my wolf a little bit within the lines, and I know that it's going to grow past those lines when I bring in all of the hair from his coat. So getting this kind of blocked in now and giving it kind of a double coat so nothing from the background really kind of bleeds through here. Then once again going back with my dark gray mixture and fanning out my small little round brush here, and we're just going to create the indication of this fur in his neck here, but still trying to leave plenty of negative space available and let a lot of that dark color come through. So that's just really important. You never want to kill all of that, as I've mentioned. So I'll start the basic form of the wolf this way, coming in on my next layer of highlight just by simply changing the value just slightly with some titanium white, and getting these strokes kind of layered in. This time I'm doing a little more skipping, because this time I want to really have both the underpainting as well as that first layer of dark undercoat to sort of show through. And so doing a little more skipping, leaving a little more negative space here, and slowly building this up again. Changing my value once again, a little more light. I kind of want to create those little folds and ruffles inside the fur that we'd see, as it kind of gives the indication of the muscle structure underneath the coat on the wolf here. Start working on the head and the face and in his muzzle now. Pardon me. So starting with those ears, going to my lightest highlight here, which is the white with a little yellow. I like to use cadmium yellow, light, or phthalo yellow. Both work well. And mix that with some titanium, and we can start kind of working on the structure of our little wolf here. So just finding the highlights from the moon here on top of the neck, and some of it's kind of peeking out around the folds in the neck, which is what I'm trying to capture. And kind of start working around the eye now, just a little bit. So it was a lot of fun working on our little wolves here. Interesting little challenge. And I think ultimately I was fairly pleased with how it came out. But we'll have to continue to maybe do more of these here in the future. A little more wildlife. As I said, I don't do a lot of wildlife, but I should probably get a little more into it, because it is pretty fun and creates an interesting, just an interesting challenge. So I've moved into my small script liner brush here now, or kind of pushing into more of the detail work on our little wolf. And this is really just kind of how I like to construct my my animals here. And you know, I think the key that makes it really work well is just having the right underpainting, and getting the right shape in the beginning is really important. I think for me that's one of the most important aspects, um, closely followed by just the highlights. I think bringing in those highlights in conjunction with all the dark underpainting is what can really sell this thing. So we're going to just kind of keep tweaking the fur on the second wolf here, and now I'm kind of bringing in a little bit of my burnt sienna. Added a little burnt sienna with my titanium white mixture and a little bit of the gray, and was able to kind of create a nice brownish color, a little bit orange in there as well. Just to give the effect that these are kind of brown wolves. So just put a little bit of coloration, not completely covering the entire coat, but just in certain areas where maybe some of the moonlight's kind of striking on the coat. And this is, of course, the back leg of the wolf here, and also his tail. So that's kind of what I'm bringing in right here now. and that'll help me to kind of get this particular wolf completed, and we can move on then to the next one. Now I'm kind of refining a little bit some of the final little strokes on the wolf and using some thick titanium white and really trying to draw out these bold highlights. All right, so that brings us to our third and final wolf in the pack here. And once again, we're going to follow the same pattern that we did on the other two wolves and get this guy blocked in real quick. I had a lot of the background showing through, so I had to make a few coats of paint to get this covered up. I didn't want to put a lot of white into the gray. I wanted to keep the gray pretty dark. And I knew adding some titanium white, which would help to opaque the paint, but also cause it to lighten up a little too much. So we'll just get this blocked in here real quick, and I'll add a extra coat of paint to try to cover up some of the background that's showing through. And then we can get moving along on our final wolf here. So now that this is kind of dried, now I'm coming back and kind of starting to add some of that first layer of dark fur. And now that I've already done this here a couple times, this will be fairly easy to follow and kind of old hat now. Of course, this wolf is a little larger, a lot more to work on. So it did take me quite a bit longer to work on this wolf than the others. But my style of painting, a lot of times I like to just kind of focus in one area or on one thing and take it to completion. Whereas some artists, they might like to jump around a little more. Maybe they'll do the entire background, the entire foreground in underpainting, underpaint all of their main focuses in the painting, and then they might go back and add all the detail work later. I just prefer to kind of tackle it as I go along. That just happens to be kind of my style and my preference, but you'll get into it and kind of decide how you want to do that. Sometimes it makes sense to paint the entire underpainting first, especially if it's a situation where I need to allow that area to dry prior to jumping back into it. It might make sense for me to just kind of get all the underpainting done, and then maybe do some of the mid painting, and then kind of finish everything up with all the final detail work. So now just getting that back leg kind of worked in here, bring in all the highlights. Yeah, so this was a pretty fun, interesting challenge here to work on our wolves here. So as I said, just simply take some time, but being being patient with it and just enjoying the process, stepping away, putting a fresh set of eyes on it. Um, the average viewing distance is usually 6 feet from the canvas, so I take time to stand up and step back and kind of look at the full picture and see if I'm missing anything, if I need to add something. So I tend to step back quite a bit, kind of get a fresh set of eyes, get a different perspective. So it's important to kind of get your nose out of the canvas a little bit, especially when you're working this finer detail where you're not quite as loose and free with your brush strokes. You're a little tighter and doing a little bit of more of that detail. So just advise that definitely stand back quite a bit and see. Now, with my brush strokes here, I'm trying to follow the skeletal and musculature aspects of the wolf. So you can see how my brush strokes are kind of following the bulge of the belly, following the curve and angle of the shoulder blade, following the neckline. It's really important that you make sure that all of your brush strokes are really staying true to those different angles on whatever it is you're trying to paint. I can't stress that enough. That's really what helps sell this thing. It kind of helps to make it look that much more realistic. Is you want to think about exactly how a certain attribute or characteristic is actually shaped. You got to think about the think about the biology here behind. Take the face of the wolf for example. We're working on the muzzle now, and how is that muzzle shaped, and then how is it shaped in relation to the eye socket, and so you want to make sure those brush strokes follow that. It's the same in any rule. Um, if you're painting mountains, for example, mountains have a lot of cracks. They've got a lot of protrusions, just different elements, and you always want to make sure that those brushstrokes are following the pattern of the contour of that shape that you're painting. And so I think that this wolf represents a great, um, just a great sample of a animal's biology, and looking at the muscle and the skeleton, and then how would the skin and how would the fur actually rest across that. So that's just a really important thing that you want to think about as you're working on animals in general. So I'm kind of just still kind of working here, bringing in the little bit of fur, still kind of layering. Um, just definitely takes a lot of time. And there's just a lot of things to think about when you're doing this. So I'm slowly kind of bringing in some of the highlights again. And I know that a lot of the moonlight is definitely reflecting on the neck and on the chest of the wolf here. So I bring a lot of highlight in there. And this is pure titanium white with a little bit of cadmium yellow light. Um, and that helps it to kind of pop a little bit more. And I can just keep working on that and bringing that together. So just a really good painting, uh, instructional video, I think, because there's just so many things in this particular painting that are good teaching points for anybody. We've got perspective, we've got contrast. We are using a lot of values from the color wheel. We're working, with anatomy. We're working on different brush strokes. But really, I really ended up using really three brushes for most of this painting. Four if you count some of the larger brushes I used in the background. But primarily, I used three brushes. I used my filbert brush, um, which I mainly used for the foreground on the rock and cliff. I used my small number 2 round brush for some of the intermediate kind of middle strokes, and then I used my script liner brush for the tiny detail strokes. But yeah, I didn't have to use too many brushes. I did use a fan brush briefly for some of the foliage in the background, um, but that was really just about it. So simple brushes. I didn't use a very varied palette. My palette really just mainly consisted of ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple, burnt umber, a little bit of sap green, and then of course titanium white and cadmium yellow. And honestly, that was kind of all of my colors. So I did use a little bit of burnt sienna at the very end, as you see that I'm using there in the fur, just to kind of give the fur a little bit of an orangish brown sort of tinge to it. But beyond that, pretty simple palette of colors, pretty simple variety of brushes that were used, um, and uh, and then just had a lot of fun building this out and getting it all put together. So I'm kind of adding a little bit of some of my dark black color here. Matter of fact, I think I did use a little bit of midnight black here instead of mixing my black, which of course, as I mentioned, you can mix your black pretty easily by using sap green, burnt sienna, burnt umbers, ultramarine blue, dioxazine purple. Mixing alizarin crimson, any of those colors can make a really nice black color. And I like to create my own blacks sometimes because when you add titanium white to opaque that pile of black mixture, it draws out different colors, um, versus just using an actual midnight black or ivory black or something. Um, so I'm going back here now, just kind of deepening some of my shadows, where I think I'm going to see them the most. Obviously, kind of behind the shoulder blade, in between um, the legs that are resting against the animal's side, um, drawing out some of the fur in some of the folds in the neck. Um, and so I'm just taking a little bit of time. And it's really just kind of bouncing back and forth between darks, between lights, stepping back, taking an overall look at the entire painting, getting a different perspective, and then coming back and making adjustments and tweaks where needed. But I'm kind of starting to reach that phase where it's really just the refining part now. It's deepening certain colors. It's drawing out certain highlights a little bit more. It's using thicker paint. Usually at the very end, I like to glob on thick paint to really make something pop out because I know when it dries, it won't dull quite as much. Coming back here with my filbert brushes, I'm just adding in a little bit more shadow in some sections that I know are kind of facing away from the moon. And yeah, just continuing through here to kind of tweak and improve things. The important thing though is not to overwork something. We all fall into that dangerous trap where we just keep working on something. Eventually, we don't even like it that much. All right, so at this point in time, the wolves have dried. I'm bringing in now some sticks and twigs here in the front of the rock that the wolf's leaning on, and then going into some contrasting with some dark sticks to some light gray ones, just to add some interest and some variety. So these are kind of the final brush strokes that I'm creating, putting these twigs, this bush um, goes right over and covers the animal. And it'll help to sort of seat the wolves. It'll kind of push them back a little bit, and just by putting this bush kind of in front. And I'm kind of doing a little bit of leafing here. Starting to leaf using my dark green with a little blue mixed into it, and then with the highlighted side, just using more of my yellow green, phthalo yellow green, and that's kind of how we're gonna finish this off. Then coming back and adding just a couple um, little grassy tufts of grass that are kind of protruding out of the cliff here. A couple more sticks. Wanted to break the horizon line a little bit. This was an eye stopper for me once again. So by design, I wanted to get that. I think we can call this painting complete. It was a pretty fun project, and I appreciate you tuning in. I ask that you please subscribe to my YouTube channel, Marc Harvill Art, and we'll look forward to doing another different, exciting new painting here real soon. Thanks for tuning in.